nature of how these spaces that we spend so much time considering art, both past, present, and future, is evolving in a changing world and a changing landscape for museums. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Kaywin Feldman, the director of the National Gallery of Art. Mariette Westerman, the Vice Chancellor at NYU Abu Dhabi, the Director and CEO-elect of the Salon and Guggenheim Museum of Foundation, and Manuel Rabate, Director of the Louvre Abu Dhabi. Excellent. So it's wonderful to be here with you all. And I think you each have such unique experiences and also such unique institutions, how they operate globally, how they operate both in a local context, and then see their place in the world, I think is something each of you consider very deeply with these different institutions. But I think this conversation has been especially pointed here in Abu Dhabi as we've watched the development of the space of Louvre Abu Dhabi being built, and how this collection has been continuing to be added to, continues to unfold, and how it continues to think of itself. I feel like, as you've said many times, Louvre Abu Dhabi developed in a way that was very much considering Abu Dhabi's place in the world as a hub for global culture, but also how this museum was looking at, basically charting the entire history of art, in a way, in the history of human civilization. So tell me about the way that, if we start here locally before we bring in the voices from the international institutions, tell me about the way that you started thinking about how you were going to develop this collection and why you felt that an impermanent collection was the best way to tackle it, a collection that could ebb and flow and rely very heavily on long-term loans and interconnected relationships with other institutions, both the Louvre in Paris as well as many others that you've dealt with.
Thanks, William. First, I would like to say that I'm very pleased to be here in the Cultural Summit, and we had some very credible examples of the vitality of the scene. Louvre Abu Dhabi is not born in a vacuum. And I want to say a few words of congratulation for my dear colleagues of the Department of Culture and Trade organizing that, because you see the strength of this gathering, of these exchanges, and this is definitely this maestro which is creating the energy of cultural institution in Abu Dhabi. Louvre Abu Dhabi is a very specific museum which is part of this very integrated strategy, core being inside the cultural district. It is the reinvention of the Universal Museum. So we are putting ourselves in the long history of the Universal Museum, and this is what the first part of the name Louvre means, these encyclopedic museums which are gathering knowledge and artworks from all over the world. But when you put together Louvre and Abu Dhabi, you get fantastic opportunities to write a new chapter of the encyclopedic Universal Museum, maybe beyond the encyclopedic approach, which is categorizing knowledge by specificity, Egyptian art, Dutch painting, or materiality, sculpture, drawings, but by insisting on what is Abu Dhabi, which is a place of connection, a place, a hub of the world. So Louvre Abu Dhabi, the capital city of this emirate, means a new universal museum which is connecting culture. So indeed, we had this opportunity to tell the story of the world in a connected way. So basically, for those who have not visited, it's like a time machine. You start at the Neolithic Revolution and you finish today. And in each room, you have artworks from all civilizations. This is where I get to your question. To be able to tell this story, it is very important to have key artworks. So what we have done was, of course, at the beginning, thanks to the relationship between France and Abu Dhabi, we managed to get the best of all, the French collection, the Louvre, of course, but also the Musée d'Orsay, Centre Pompidou, Musée Guimet, Musée du Quai Branly, Versailles, all the museums that have been gathered around us to help us build this universal narrative. But in parallel to these fantastic laws, we have grown the collection of the Louvre Abu Dhabi, which is owned by Abu Dhabi government. And in the galleries, what you see is objects from both sources. What we have added, and maybe we'll get back to that, is artworks which are also coming from, I would say, other type of relationship. We worked a lot with the Arab world, with Oman, with the Kingdom of Saudi, with of course all the Emirates, with Jordan, and we have these artworks which are also from the region, rooting this universal story in our territories. And while we are evolving, the French loans it was part of the project. They are going down, the collection is going up, but we also have these new relationships which are providing new artworks, which are also being developed.
And I feel, each of you, both of you, if we're looking at how things operate within a space, how things operate within a culture, we're also operating in changing cultures and changing demographics, changing perspectives. Like both of you are historic appointments and the first women to hold your respective roles, which is incredibly important. We need to, and these things need to be considered. And I know, when looking at how the National Gallery of Art, and you've been in the shop for 4 years? 5 years. Time flies. You're 2024, right? Anyway. But if we're looking at how you've tackled this role, I know you're thinking very carefully about this being the reflection of this country. And the way that this country, we're going to have a demographic change by 2046 of what even the multicultural face of this country looks like in terms of majority populations. As well, you're always, I think, going back to your time in the Twin Cities, looked at how to look at underserved communities, how to look at voices that aren't as loud in this room and how to amplify them. So how do you feel that looking at how these collections evolve and how you're looking at having conversations with other institutions in answering those questions, in responding to the time and being a nimble institution while also being one of, I guess, grounded in cultural standing?
Thank you, and I'm delighted to be here and grateful to the organizers for inviting me to be a part of this. The National Gallery was founded in 1937 by a single person, Andrew Mellon, who wrote a letter to President Roosevelt offering to give the money to build a building and his collection if the U.S. government would agree to fund the Museum in Perpetuity as a world-class museum. So it's a relatively rare origin story for a national museum to be founded by a single person. And I often think back that when Andrew Mellon gave his gift in 1941, when we opened in 1941, that his collection was mostly European. A few American works snuck in sort of towards the end, and in 1941, the United States was 91% white. And so Andrew Mellon's idea of culture was Europe. Beginning and end, it was Europe. And then what we collected in American art was really American art that followed the European tradition. And then when his son, Paul Mellon, opened the East Building, which he and his sister supported, he said that it was his father's vision and it's theirs that the National Gallery would always be a changing institution, evolving in its benefit to artists, scholars, and the public. And so, in my work there, I've been thinking about our origin, about our founder, about the goal to serve our nation broadly. And if you fast forward to today, America will soon become majority people of color. So by 2043, around there, it's predicted that the white population in the United States will be the minority, and that's separate from immigration. That's pure demographics of Americans today. And so I feel that to fulfill the vision of Andrew and Paul Mellon and of the many Americans who fund the National Gallery, that it is an exciting opportunity for us to truly reflect the nation. And that means a lot of change at the National Gallery because, like lots of museums, our collection is, the artists in our collection are 91% white male artists. And it will take us years and years and years to sort of change that. And the truth is that at the end of the day, it's about being representative of all people. So we continue to honor our extraordinary European collections. We are completely devoted, both in the collection and in our programming, to the work of old master European artists as much as we think about Americans today. So, you know, I think in our polarized world, everybody wants to believe that something is either or, that you can't be many things, that it has to be one or the other, and we really see a plurality across the spectrum.
Yeah, and heritage as well. I mean, if we listed, you know, the hats you've worn over the years, probably would run out of time. But you've always had, you know, fine art as a basis of your being, and so I feel like taking on the Guggenheim Foundation globally, there's a lot to consider there. But you've always kind of considered all of these different global views through the nature of the way that you've approached your career. So, if you could walk me through, as you're coming into this position of the Guggenheim, how you've been looking at, you know, what the Guggenheim means in the current moment, in the current time, and what the different reflections of it across the world mean, and how you're thinking about that in terms of building the collection moving forward.
William, thank you very much for that question. I too want to take the opportunity to compliment the Department of Culture and Tourism and congratulate them on the staggering success, growing success of the Culture Summit ever since 2017. It's amazing to have so many of you from around the world with us in our wonderful crossroads city. And of course, DCT, long having been a partner for me in my roles at Abu Dhabi, I'm really delighted to become an even stronger partner as I come into this role. So here comes the disclaimer that I have the opportunity to make, which is that I haven't started yet, which is a great and luxurious position from which to talk about museums. But of course, I've long thought about museums. I'm thrilled to be here with Kevin and Manuel, both fellow travelers and friends of very, very long years. And of course, in my role, one of my roles was working for a foundation, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. And in that role, funding arts and culture, often I found myself in a position that I didn't really relish, but it really was a position to ask museum directors to do more, to step forward and be more relevant to their societies, even if that was especially hard if one came from a historical collection in the way that the Louvre in Paris has been and that the National Gallery of Art have been. And now I'm up against it. I've stepped in and I said I'll do it. And what I want to say about your question about the Guggenheim today and the Guggenheim past and future is that what excited me about joining is that it is a museum resolutely dedicated to modern and contemporary art. And in the context of this question of collections, which is at the core of our session, I believe, it is often said that it's often asked about museums of modern and contemporary art. How should they collect? Should they collect at all? Where should their collecting begin? Where should it end? You can ask the directors of MoMA, of the Whitney, of the Guggenheim for that matter, where do people come down on that? The great thing, and one real motivation for me to join the global Guggenheim constellation of our museums, the Frank Lloyd Wright Building in New York, the Peggy Guggenheim Collection in Venice, Guggenheim Bilbao, and now this magnificent Guggenheim Museum Abu Dhabi that you see rising very fast. If you haven't seen it yet, go look at it. It's getting there. What's so exciting about the foundation, the Solomon R. Guggenheim Foundation, and the museums it has spawned and overseen, is that it was always grounded in the idea that the art of today should be collected and preserved. And so that means that artists have always been core to it. Our original collections, the Solomon R. Guggenheim and Hilla Ribe, who actually was the first woman director of at least one of the pieces of the institution, the Museum of Non-Objective Art, that became the Guggenheim Museum in New York. What the two of them decided was to bring the art that was then barely known in the United States, Kandinsky, Paul Klee, Braque, all these wonderful, still living artists, to collect them and bring them into public view, not just to display them, as many museums of contemporary art do, but also to take on the responsibility to preserve, to study them, to make them better known over time, so that in the future, when that art would have become historical, it would still mean something to us today. And every one of our